Hello and welcome. Today I am joined by Neal Reynolds, who is Sports Physiotherapist, Senior Lecturer at Buckinghamshire New University, as well as Consultant at the Football Association of Wales. So Neal, thank you very much for joining.
No problem at all. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be here.
So I can see you've got the uniform on there. How's it going at the university?
Yeah, it's going really well. Yeah, I teach on the sports therapy program. I've been there since 2015. So we have a BSc sports therapy program and an MSc sports therapy program. They've just started BSc and MSc physiotherapy there as well. So yeah, no, it's good. It's based at Wickham. We've got a couple of campuses all around. But yeah, I mainly teach obviously at Wickham campus and teach a couple of the modules there, to be honest. So it's good. And I combine the university also has a TAS provision for local athletes, so talented athletes that are in the area. So I also do that at the same time as the TAS physio. We provide physiotherapy, sports science, psychology, lifestyle, S&C kind of support services to local athletes that probably don't have them, and talented athletes, and that's another part of my role whilst I'm there. So no, it's good. We're going very well.
Very good. And like from a sports therapy perspective, then, how do you see where that fits within the rehabilitation space? Because there's a lot of talk about HCPC and physio, etc. So where do you see that fitting?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing. I mean, obviously sports therapy, the Society of Sports Therapists was obviously, formed in 1990. So it's only been going, 32 years compared to, I'm a physio, and that's what I graduated as in the mid 90s. And, obviously the CSP has been going for, 1890. So you put another 100 years on top of that, to be honest. So sports therapy, is a very new, to a certain extent, new idea. I think it was obviously formed, by Graham and Keith initially, I think, and they were working in football, full time, and saw, I suppose, a gap. I think where there are, one thing with physiotherapy, and definitely when I trained, it's changed a lot over the last, 20, 30 years. There's lots of aspects of physiotherapy that I think you get taught. Definitely in years gone by, it was taught very much neuro, respiratory, cardiovascular, orthopedics, etc. And one of the areas is musculoskeletal medicine, and it's only one of the areas you get taught. And even more so now, I think the way the courses are designed is, physios have become much more prominent within triage and everything, within, first contact practitioners and extended scope practitioners, that it's quite a broad subject. And so sports therapy, how I see it, is one aspect of physiotherapy. It literally is one of those aspects taken, and you learn it for, usually your 3-year BSc honours course, and it's drilling down, I think, into probably more detail about, sports injuries, which is obviously in the name, but it's not just about sports injuries, it's about any injuries. I mean, people work in clinics and what have you, and I think it definitely has this role. And I think that's probably what Graham and Keith saw years ago, was there, a lot of physios, and it still happens to a certain extent now, come out of university with a very broad generic knowledge. Absolutely. They're taught definitely about kind of inquiry-based learning. They're talked about clinical reasoning. But whether they probably have the in-depth knowledge about musculoskeletal conditions, maybe not, I don't know. And I think there was definitely this gap where I think that that there was another profession that could slot into physiotherapy. Now, sorry, into football and sport. I think, it is different. It's 30 years. It's only going to be 30 years compared to 130. So it's like the baby of the therapy world. And, it's not the only, as you probably know, it's not the only profession. You have the BASRAT, you have the rehabilitators, and you have other similar professions, people in terms of osteopaths, chiropractors. There's lots of different professions that do a very similar job, but in a different way. Obviously, the one biggest difference is HCPC registered, and you're right. I mean, it's regulated, unregulated by the HCPC. and physios are, whereas at the moment sports therapy isn't. I think whether it will come, I don't know, to be honest. I think there's probably a very mixed, I don't really know, I don't get involved in the politics of it all, whether there is a desire to change it. I think there are some within the society that probably would want to change it and make it regulated. There are some that don't. I mean, the one thing is the title obviously isn't protected. So, essentially anybody anybody could call themselves a sports therapist if they wanted to, doing a couple of courses. Whereas I think one thing I would definitely say nowadays, if you look at a lot of the job adverts, they are asking for graduate sports therapists, which is the difference. I mean, that is essentially the difference. One you go through the degree and you do the the dissertation, and it's a difficult degree. I mean, it's very, very similar. I've taught on physiotherapy programs. It's the level that you teach at is very, very similar. It's just much more focused, I think, on MSK medicine, whereas as I say, physio is a bit more broad because it has to be, because of all the various aspects and fields that there are within the NHS and what have you, which is where the kind of main bulk of work comes from, especially for physios. So I think, yeah, without a doubt, it's slotted in, and in the last, as I say, 20 or 30 years, there's more and more jobs coming up. I think that clubs are beginning to realise that they have a role. I mean, if I'm honest, when I first when I was at Norwich, we had a couple of sports therapists there that worked with me, and probably, being honest, like I think a lot of other physios, they would initially have thought them being soft tissue therapists. That's what they were initially, if I'm honest with you. But I think as time's gone on, what I definitely realised, and I think a lot of people have realised, is that actually there is much more to sports therapy practice than that. The whole rehab bit that you say, and I think this idea that you can have people that specialize a lot in the kind of rehab of musculoskeletal and sports injuries in your club and can help you. It's not just about them doing soft tissue work. And I think that's something that we've got to, being honest, I'm a bit of a campaigner, if I'm honest with you, for it. And that's one of the things I would like to think is, its testament is the fact that I teach on the course. I think it has a place. I think we've got to be open to it. We've got to embrace these kind of the different professions, and I think we all have a role to play. And as I said, I think that there's a definite role for them. And again, when I was at Norwich and we had these two sports therapists, what I started to do was let them do more and more away. Yes, don't get me wrong, soft tissue therapy is a big part of it, and it should be. I don't think we should be ashamed of that. I think, if I'm honest with you, I think at times there's this kind of, and if I'm honest, I think a lot of it comes from maybe some of the, physios around where soft tissue therapy it doesn't really have a role and what have you. It does have a role. If you work with any athlete, they will tell you that is what they want. They want hands-on, treatment. That's what they want. They don't just want exercise. Now, whatever your thoughts and your ethos and your ideas are about exercise being the main thing to change patients and get them better, you can't get away from what does the patient want as well. And we have to be patient centered, and obviously in football that's very player centered. And we've got to, for me, I don't think we can ignore that. And I have to say, I think at times we kind of dismiss it, but I've definitely never seen it diminish. In fact, it gets more and more popular in terms of soft tissue therapy. If you ask most players, they like it, they enjoy it, they feel better. And all this, evidence-based medicine, and completely, I mean, obviously where I work, it's all about evidence-based and having clinical reasoning. We look a lot at physiology. Yeah, we look at how it changes you as a person, as opposed to actually the psychology of how it makes you feel. And undoubtedly for a lot of athletes, it makes them feel better coming out. So I definitely think there is a role, as I said, for sports therapy practice. It is in its infancy, if I'm honest. And I think but what I've definitely noticed, and I don't know if this is true or not, but there was someone told me something recently about that there's more jobs in football, pro football, as a sports therapist than there are as physiotherapists, which I'm quite surprised at. I don't know if that's true. I don't know. But I definitely, if you look at a lot of the adverts, I mean, I am a member of the FMPA, and you know, all the adverts that come through, where it always used to say physio every single time, all the jobs was physio. It now says physio slash sports therapist, because I think that, you know, the clubs have realised that there are other professions out there.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, it's an interesting one. We've always recruited sports therapists, and we've had a couple of sports rehabbers, and they're brilliant, like really good people, as well as from the clinical side. Like one of our Dom's been with us for 9 years, and he's brilliant. He goes in and teaches loads of physios, chiros, osteos, doctors. So I think it's like you were saying, there's a lot of different professions. It's down to the person, isn't it, as well, of what that you can get good and bad, or whatever good and bad means, even of everything. But no, I'm a big fan of it, and I think it's again, sports rehab, really interesting. We do a lot of work with Basrat, really impressive, very progressive. They can move a bit quicker than physio can, it seems, as an organisation. So yeah, no, it's great. It's great to see you kind of being involved with the sports therapy.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more exactly as you say, there's a lot more flexibility, I think, potentially within the Society of Sports Therapists and BASRAT, because they are much newer, and because they're not, you know, as regulated potentially. You know, I think probably BASRAT is slightly more regulated, but you know, they still have that more flexibility. And going back to, like, as I said, my time at Norwich, we used to have students, and you know, I started to notice that and maybe it was just where I was, you know, that when you had a physiotherapy student, there were certain aspects that they were really good at, medico-legally, note keeping, you know, understanding the anatomy, the physiology, great. When it actually came to assessing and treating and doing something, at times I felt that was where they were deficient. Whereas I'd have a sports rehabber that would come in, or a sports therapist that would come in as a student, and it was just different. They just, okay, there were, you know, there may be aspects that they weren't quite so good at. I mean, you know, I think some of the medico-legal aspects of it, you had to kind of go over a bit more. I think probably because physio is so more regulated. But do you know what? If I asked them to go in a gym and just, you know, monitor someone or watch someone or pick up on some things or some, you know, anomalies or whatever, they were very good at it. And that's the first time it really hit home to me that I think we do need to embrace these professionals. I think they can work alongside. I don't think we've got to get away from this competing all the time. I think that there is this element, I think, within the professions of this competition. I think there's room for everybody, if I'm honest. And I think everybody has a slightly different role to play, and there's absolutely no reason for me, you know, the more professions we embrace and the multidisciplinary team that we embrace, the better it is, if I'm honest with you, rather than just having one, you know, like a physio or whatever it might be.
Yeah, no, great. And what made you want to get in, like, started as a physio in the first place then?
Do you know, people always ask this, and if I'm brutal, I'm too old to remember, if I'm honest. I think, and I tell everybody, and this is the story, is that well, I didn't think in terms of, I broke my leg when I was 16. I broke my ankle. It was I was playing football with my mates at school at lunchtime, and some idiot decided, and you know, we were watching a game, you're thinking this isn't going to go well. I don't know. I do remember that. And he jumped at my ankle. He was a rugby player, right? And he didn't really have any football skill, and nor did I. I'm not dressing myself up here, but he literally jumped at my ankle, broke it, fractured my ankle. And it was I don't know, you know, people are old enough to remember, but it was the last day of the ambulance strike. So, and we had a hockey tournament on the same day. So there was all these cars in the car park, right? Literally hundreds of cars, and no one had thought that we might need an ambulance or someone come and pick up someone who was injured. So this literally, they were all over the place. You couldn't get in. And I remember this police van turning up as an ambulance, and they literally had to, you know, come onto the pitch, pick, and this is my memory of it. I mean, I might be, you know, completely making this up, but this is definitely my memory, is that they picked me up on this stretcher, and I was weaving through these cars into this van. And the police driver who was driving the van thought the best thing to do was get me there as quick as possible. Now, no offense, I now know, you know, I've broken my leg, you know, neurovascularly I was intact, so that wasn't a problem. I didn't need to rush. And yet he literally went over every speed bump. And because it was a police van, I remember that journey. It was horrendous. So no, I went and had it fixed, but I don't remember having much physio afterwards. That's my memory. And when we went to, you know, sixth form, it was kind of, what are you going to do? If I'm absolutely honest with you, I think I was looking at physio and medicine, but my A levels uh, weren't the right ones to go and do medicine. Physio seemed like something to do. There's no, you know, there's no one medical in my family. So I ended up doing, you know, applying to physio. So that's the story, I say, and I think it's true, but yeah, that's my memory of it anyway. Yeah.
And so where did you study at?
So I went to Brighton. So I went to University of Brighton. So I studied 92 to 95. And yeah, I loved it. I mean, I really enjoyed it. It was very different. I mean, now I'm on the other side, you know, I'm a teacher on the other side, and learning in those days as a university was very, you know, using the word didactic. It was literally someone stood at the front, you're going to write this down, I write it down, you know, and you learn it verbatim and that kind of way. It didn't have the flexibility probably that it has now. I mean, I've definitely, as I said, I've taught on physio programs since, and it's all about inquiry based and giving people ideas and getting them to think for themselves. If I'm honest, I don't think you really thought for yourself as a student in those days. It was based in Eastbourne. I actually trained with a good friend of, you know, a friend of mine who I worked with later on at Arsenal, and Colin Lewin. So the two of us trained together. So I know Colin quite well, and quite a few actually. Simon Harland, who's gone over to, you know, Ireland and works with the Irish rugby over there, and there's a few of us that were really quite interested in sport. I reckon it was probably a 1-to-5 ratio, I think, probably of male to female. So it was quite, you know, it's definitely more females than it was males. But a great course. I really enjoyed it. You know, hard, really hard, but loved it. And yeah, I mean, as I said, it was based in Eastbourne, so it was it was always, you know, it wasn't quite Brighton, if I'm honest with you, you know, in terms of a place to be. But yeah, we made the most of it, what we could do when we were there anyway. So no, I enjoyed it.
And did you have a mindset of what you wanted to do then? Was there a career in mind?
I don't think so at the time. I like sport. I'm not good at it. I play it. You know, if someone says my biggest, I've always said, I if you ask me to go and play a game of sport, I could play it. So if you ask me to go and play a game of squash, I can play it. Tennis, whatever. I'm not good at it. I can play it to a level that I can have a game with you. And so that's what I was like definitely in those years. And I've always followed football for my sins. I'm a West Ham supporter. And I had a season ticket on the old North Bank, you know, standing in the late 80s and what have you. And so I've always liked sport. And I think I was probably biased towards that when I came out of university. But no, I mean, I came out of university and did my rotations. In those days, you were junior, you know, and then there was senior 2, senior 1 rotations, and you basically had to do all the rotations in the hospitals. And everybody, you have to do rotations, you know. And it's funny because, as I said, Colin, who's a good friend, didn't do them. He went straight into Arsenal, and everyone at the time went, "Oh, you can't do that. What are you doing?" You know, and I don't know, I'd be interested to find out what he thought about it. But, you know, I did all the rotations for 2 years, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed my life as an NHS physio. I really did. I enjoyed the different aspects of it. I probably always knew I was going to become into outpatients or orthopedics or something like that at the time. And whilst I was in the first couple of years, I worked as a rugby physio for Streatham Croydon Rugby Club. So you probably know Nick Worth, who I know very well. He was at Orpington hospital with me, and at the time he was one of my seniors, and I took over from him at Streatham Croydon Rugby Club because he you know, he couldn't do it anymore, so I ended up doing that. And that's where probably my love for sport came from. It was, again, very different. You know, I think I got £10 a clinic, and, you know, or maybe, and then one clinic a week, and then a game on a Saturday, and every week you go home and away. But I loved it. I loved I didn't do it for money. I did it for experience. I did it for the fun of it and really enjoyed it. But at the time, as I said, at the same time, I was doing my NHS stuff. But if I'm honest, after a couple of years, I just got to the point where I thought, do you know what? I don't know. I don't know if this is for me. If I'm honest, I don't know if physio is what I want to do. So I decided to go and do chemistry A level at night school. I was in Croydon. So at Croydon night school, I did chemistry A level with the intention of going to do it and then going to do medicine, if I'm honest, and coming out of physio and just doing it. And so that was my plan until football arrived. And the story of getting into football from there was I got Nick, as I said, who I knew. He was at West Bromwich Albion as the head of there. There was in those days you didn't have big departments, and I think the job came up in the academy. And he said to me, would you be interested in applying? He said, he knew that I was interested in sport. So I said, yeah. So I did. I applied. I was interviewed by Richard O'Kelly and John Truick, who were the coaches at the time, not by Nick. But the irony of it all is the day of my interview at West Brom was the day of my first exam in my chemistry A level. And it was like, what am I going to do? I've spent a whole year learning chemistry. I want to go and do medicine, but here's a chance to go and work in, at the time they were well, it wasn't Championship, I don't think it called at the time. I think it was League One, I think it was called. And I thought, oh, what do you do? What do you do? And I remember going with a mate of mine who's nothing to do with football, and we sat on the bank of the Thames over a couple of beers, chatting about what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And in the end, do you know what he just said to me, Neil? Just go with what you feels right. What do you feels right? Because I didn't know I was going to get the job. Let's be honest here. Nick wasn't on the interview panel. It wasn't this kind of, oh yeah, just apply and you've got a job. And, there was a few of us that got interviewed, so I didn't know I was going to get it. So there's me thinking I could give up my potential chance of doing medicine. So anyway, I decided to go for the interview, and yeah, the rest is history. I got the job, and then I worked with Nick there from 98 to 2000. Loved it. Absolutely. Do you know what? And I know everyone goes, oh, the good old days. It was. I loved it. It was youth team football. Richard O'Kelly and John Truitt were my coaches. Got on with them really well. I was the bus driver on a Saturday morning. So coach, in a minibus, there I was driving people, the players, and you were the kit man. You didn't have a kit man. You was you took everybody, you put all the kit out, you treated them, you came home. Then it was the reserves, and we didn't have a reserve. There was just me and Nick and I. So, and there wasn't all this big academy with everything. So, the reserves would be usually Nick would do the reserves in the early days. Then he wanted me to do them because he just thought, yeah, go on, I'll palm it off onto him. So I got the reserves and I got the academy. But you know what? I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I had 2 really, really good years there, working all the hours God sent. I got West Brom had a house. It doesn't look like it does now, right? So if you've been to the Hawthorns, it doesn't it looked nothing like that. And there was this house on the grounds of the of the Hawthorns, and they let me rent it. So bear in mind, when I woke up in the mornings, you open your curtains and there's your work, and you're kind of going, oh my life. But it was great. I had met some great people, and I got my bug. If I'm honest, I got my bug for football off the back of that, and I never look back. Today I kind of think, well, what would I have done? What would I do now if I had have carried on, pursuing medicine? Let's be honest, I would have been 24, 25 at the time, so it didn't necessarily mean I'd have got in to medicine. And also, I don't know, but it was I call it the sliding doors moments, these T-junctions in life, and you have to make them, don't you? You have to make these choices. And what didn't seem quite right, because I found the NHS a bit limiting. It was going through at the time, I think it was this idea with GP fund holders, and you were given 6 treatments, and right, okay, if you can't get them better after 6 treatments, you have to go back to the GP and beg for another 6 treatments, and then and then beg another again and again. And it was just kind of, I just thought, I don't know if this is for me. I want to be a bit more dynamic. I don't sit still. I want to do something. It wasn't enough for me at the time. And so yeah, so I didn't look back, but it was a strange way, if I'm honest with you, getting into football.
Yeah, no, sounds it. So what made you want to leave West Brom then?
Football's a funny business, isn't it? I worked under a lot of managers there. Or well, I say worked under. I mean, as I said, I was only the academy and youth. But there was initially when I first went, it was Dennis Smith and Malcolm Crosby who was with him, and then there was with him working with Cyril Regis. You know, great people, fabulous people, and I had great times. Then but Brian Little worked there then, and then Brian Megson, Gary Megson, sorry, came in. And it was, I literally left just as Gary Megson came in because Dennis Smith rang me up and said, do you want to, you know, I think he'd asked Nick, because actually Nick kind of said to me, oh, you know, would you be interested in doing first team football? And I'm like, well, I don't know, you know, I was whatever I was, 24 at the time. Yeah, I might do it. He said, oh, you know, I think Dennis is looking for a physio at Oxford, and John Clinkard, who he was known, you know, he's part of the furniture at Oxford. He was everything, and he was leaving. He was going to set up his own practice, and so, you know, Dennis said, "Do you want to come for an interview?" And so rang me up out of the blue, and I was like, "Well, okay, yeah, I fancy that." And so went down there and yeah, got the job, and so went to go to Oxford United. So it was going down a league. It was at the old Manor Ground. So I went down one league, and but it was being first team physio. I mean, there's always I got lots of funny anecdotes, I think, throughout my time. And when it was my second, well, it wasn't my second time as it materialized. About 6 months before, I was on the bus away. We were a reserve game, and I was coming home, and the phone went, and he said, "Oh, it's Lou Macari." What? You know, yes, Lou Macari. And of course, I knew my football. I was like, right, okay. He said, yeah. He said, because I was away at Stoke on the day of the reserves. Yeah, I've been watching you tonight. You know, I thought how you ran on was really good, really good. You know, your technique and the way you dealt with the players, really professional and all that. Anyway, so he said, you know, I'm looking for a physio. Do you fancy coming? You know, and I'm like, yeah, great. Oh, naive 24-year-old. And so I rang the family. I rang everyone. I told everyone, do you know what? I've got a job at Stoke. Okay. And I rang Nick and said, Nick, you know, guess what? I got this. Well, you know, would you be all right? Do you think it'd be, you know? He said, yeah, go for it. He said, you know, what do you sound like? And I was like, oh, you know, yeah, he had a you know, a London accent. You know, where's Lou Macari from? You know, and I'm like, oh, yeah. I was like, oh no. And he'd got his brother to set me up, but I told the world I was going to go into Stoke, and that set me up again a little bit for banter in football and how you got to be a bit, you know. I was very naive. I was very wet behind the ears, and so that I always say it was my second opportunity to go and do first team football. But yeah, unfortunately, it was my first in reality. So yeah, I never forgave Nick for it. I always remember it now, and it was a. Yeah. Now, when I look back on it now, I was stupid, not even realising Lou Macari. Why didn't I think he had a Scottish accent? You know, why it wasn't a problem. But I was just So yeah, another example. But yeah, so yeah, I went to Oxford and yeah, did a couple. I only did 1 year in Oxford in the end, because the job at Norwich came up, and that's football, isn't it? You know, I mean, again, I think at the time, I was a bit gutted really because we were going from the Manor Ground to the Kassam. And so I got asked about my, you know, my thoughts on the new building and all that kind of stuff. And I was involved in all the planning and the plans, and it was quite exciting for me. I was quite young as a first team physio, and you know, bear in mind again at Oxford, I had some great people who worked with me, you know, and you know, Charlie Woozy, a couple of the sports therapists that worked with me, and they were brilliant. And it was again a completely different idea to West Brom. West Brom was big, Oxford was small. You know, playing two touch in the gym in the Manor Ground. You know, getting changed in the university, you know, building, and then going out onto a park and playing on a just a university park pitch. The physio room was at the Manor Ground. It didn't have its own bit. Although to be fair, West Brom at the time is nothing like it is now. I mean, it was a room still in the Hawthorns, but you went out to a Aston and trained there. But again, all it had was like a university training facilities and changing facilities, whereas but Oxford was like another step down on that. But you know what, I always say, and I think probably you hear loads of old physios saying it, you learn your trade in those kind of places, because you had to do everything. You had to be everything. You had to do everything. You were the S&C, the psychologist, the kit man. And I know everybody says it. Well, it wasn't the kit man, to be fair. We had a kit man, but you had to do these things, but you did. You just got on with it, and you learned fast. You learned quick. But yeah, so I was a bit gutted really in that way, because only a year in, it was just kind of got to this kind of situation where the job came up at Norwich. I saw it being advertised, and actually somebody at Oxford said, "Oh, have you seen this job?" He got handed to me on a bit of paper. I was like, "Oh yeah, I'll put it in the bin. Don't worry about that. That's fine." And I kind of had a look and thought, Norwich, they were a League One at the time, first team physio. Tim Shepherd, again, a bit like John Clinkard, had been at Norwich for donkey's years. And so he was moving on. And so I went for an interview at Norwich. I mean, it's funny now because I love Norwich, and although it's not my home, it's my second home, it's my spiritual home. The drive, I always say to a lot of Norfolk people, if you've ever been to Norfolk, I mean, it's in the middle of nowhere. It's absolutely miles. And I remember, if you should have asked me on a map of England where was Norwich, I would just about put it in that lump on the right hand side, East Anglia, but I wouldn't have a clue. And I just drove. And I remember driving from Oxford and driving and just driving, and it just seemed like I was going forever. Do you know what I mean? It's one of these weird places. At the time the A11 wasn't dualed, so you just kept driving. I thought, where am I going here? There's nothing. There's absolutely nothing here. There's no cities. There's nothing. There's no motorways. And it's a bit, I always relate it, it's a bit like Fantasia, where this city appears, and it's like, this is Norwich. Welcome to Norwich. So I always remember that. And went for an interview with Nigel Worthington, who I got really well with, great. And Tim Shepherd was interviewing me, got offered the job as I was literally driving a mile down the road out of the training ground, and that was it, going to Norwich really. So it's funny how football works. It just you see these things come along, and you have to grab them. It's these kind of opportunities, I think, that you just have to grab with both hands, especially in those days.
And how long were you in Norwich for?
So I did 2 spells at Norwich. I did a spell at Norwich initially till 2008, and loved it. Brilliant. A lot of really good years. We had a couple of playoffs, playoff semi-final, two playoff finals, one which we lost. So we lost to Birmingham. And then later on, when I came back from a second stint, we beat obviously Middlesbrough in the playoff final. So I went to Wembley and did that. So I was there till 2008, and then a job came up at Arsenal as doing a rehab physio. And I'd been doing first team physio for 2001, so 7 years. Really enjoyed it, loved it. I had some great people working with me. For the majority, I had, when I first went there, I had one part-timer, Keith Creamer, who worked with me, and then I had Pete Shaw, who's now at Birmingham. He worked with me for years, and I loved it. But I got to the point, I'd always wanted to work at the top, and I know there'd be people out there arguing that Arsenal's not the top, but anyway, I wanted to work at the top. I wanted to see what it was like to work at a big club, and a job came up at Arsenal, for a rehab physio, and so I rang Colin and just said, would you, can I apply? Do you think? He kind of said what the job was, and I said, yeah, do you know what? Love it. Apply, and I did. So I applied, and got the job, went to Arsenal, moved my family. You know, I was only with I was with my wife. My wife was pregnant at the time, so we moved down to Tring, so in Hertfordshire, and yeah, that was it. I thought I was leaving Norwich. Do you know what I mean? I thought that was it. I was gone, and we, you know, I loved my time at Norwich, but I needed to do a different challenge at the time, if I'm honest. And you don't turn down Arsenal, I don't think, not when you're at Norwich. And so yeah, so but the irony of it, I mean, I did 2 years at Arsenal, and I loved my time there. Great people, great club. You know, my brother's a season ticket holder, so he was absolutely made up. I mean, it was like heaven. He came with me on my interview day and sat outside, I think, just literally in awe, and just, you know, in his car, just thinking, wow, this place is just unbelievable, you know. And it was for me. I mean, bear in mind, I'd followed football all my life, and here I was driving into, you know, London Colney, and just, yeah, it's just amazing. And it was, I had some fabulous people, great players, completely different, you know, completely different level, players a different level, you know, lots of international players, you know, loads of staff, where, you know, you go from somewhere where there was a much more smaller amount of staff. And it's, you know, Norwich was very much a family club, and I'm not saying Arsenal wasn't, but it was much more of a business. It was definitely a real business, and but brilliant. You know, I really enjoyed it. I mean, you know, I don't have a bad word to say, to be honest, about it. But I only did it for 2 years, and people go, what, why? You know, and I, you know, I always look back with a smile and all that, and you make decisions at times in your life, and I did it for 2 years. There was quite a few of us as physios there. There was S&C, you know, and strength and conditioners and sports scientists and loads of people. And obviously with Colin, and I got on really well, you know, and Colin was brilliant throughout it. But I missed first team football. I missed going away. I missed being part of the team, if I'm honest. And you are part of the team, but you're not. You know, when they'd all get on the bus at, you know, Friday lunchtime at 1 o'clock to go to the airport, and you're like, okay, right, I'll stay here then. Right, I'll get the, you know, the injured players, we'll crack on and let's get them fit. And we did. And, you know, I did home games and I loved it. You know, again, well, why wouldn't you enjoy that atmosphere? And I've always said, the day that you don't enjoy walking out on match day is the day you shouldn't be in football, because that's what you do it for. You know, we all know that's not the bulk of your life. You know that's not the bulk of your working life. Most of it is Monday to Friday, which most fans don't see. But match day is what it's all about, and walking out at the Emirates and just being part of that is unbelievable. You know, for me, a little lad from Kent who, you know, was rubbish on a football field and whatever, to do that for me was fabulous, and I really enjoyed it. Made some really good friends there, and with players as well, and I got on really well with quite a few of them. And you got close. That was the one thing that was different when you were rehab. You know, it's different because when you were rehab physio, you got close to certain players a lot, but others you didn't really know. And it's the ones that were fit you didn't really know quite so well, because they were always fit, and therefore they were always going away. And, you know, with Arsenal, where you were training every Tuesday, you know, playing games every Tuesday, Saturday, it was, you know, you didn't see much of them in my respect, from my point of view, you know. And so I got very close to, as I said, some really good people there. But yeah, I just missed the cut and thrust of the run on the first team. And linked to that, my wife, I would say, probably didn't particularly settle where we lived in Tring. And of course, if you put then two things together and you kind of think, you know, is this right? And there's me, you know, you can imagine the two people, you know, on my shoulder, and this side going, what are you thinking? You're going to leave Arsenal? What are you doing? Just, you know, get your head straight and get back on it again. And on this side, I'm thinking, don't know. I've always said I want to do what I want to do in my career. It's my career, and if I have to take a brave move, I do. And so I did. So Simon Spencer, who's at EIS and does stuff with England, obviously, and he was at Norwich. He when I left, he came in, And then I heard through the grapevine again, people tell you that these things are happening, and someone at Norwich rang me, knew that I wasn't particularly settled, and said, would you be interested, because apply. And I was like, oh, okay, just thought I might have, would it be something? I saw it advertised, read it, thought, do you know what? Actually, yeah. So I went back to Norwich. So and I was like, what are you doing? You can imagine people outside of my world probably don't understand it, but I had my reasons, and Colin understood. I spoke to him, and I think he understood my reasons. And at the time, for me, I missed that cut and thrust of it all, I think, if I'm honest. So I went back to Norwich with Paul Lambert, and we had some great years, to be honest, in terms of success on the pitch. Premier Leagues, championships. Obviously, when I turned up, they were in League One, so they were in League, and again worked their way up, and it was, as Norwich are now, really, they kind of go up and down, and absolutely loved it. Went back for 2010 till 2015. And then family, isn't it? I mean, family life is I had two children. Well, I had two children, and I always remember my daughter in a conservatory, and one day on a Sunday, and I was on my phone organising a scan or something, and she looked at me. So what was she been? 7, and she said, "Dad, you're never here." And I went, "Yeah, I am. No, I'm here. I'm playing." She went, "No, you're not here. You're not here, are you, Dad?" And even now, it makes me tingle and kind of get goosebumps and think, wow, is that what you think? Is that what you think of me? And I think my wife would probably be honest that, at the time it was like, it's very difficult to live with someone that's never here. Every Christmas, every on the holidays, we're lying there on the beach and I'm answering calls about medicals. Christmas Eve, I'm answering calls about, getting medicals on Boxing Day. And it just, we've talked in the past, haven't we, about, it just takes over your life. It is your life. And it's very difficult to explain that to someone that's never been in football. And I think it's different now. I don't think, not better, probably better in a way, but it just takes over your life. And whilst I loved it, being told when you can have your annual leave, it's 2 weeks, and that's it in June. Okay. And and actually, if we need you, we're going to call you. Okay. Right. Okay. And then it's, if we lose, right, we're in on Sunday, but I'm supposed to be going out with my family. No, you're in Sunday. Okay. Friday night, I remember a story on a Friday night, getting a phone call at 8 o'clock. I was out in the restaurant with my mum and dad, and one of the players rang me and said he dropped a game ready on his foot accidentally. It'd fallen off the side or something, and he was in a hotel. Can I come and have a look at it now? So I left my family. My mum and my dad had come up for a meal that weekend. No, sorry, I've got to go. So I went to the hotel, looked at it. Yeah, this needs x-raying it, x-rayed it, or took it to hospital. I went with him to hospital, x-rayed it, had to then give the manager the bad news at 11 o'clock that night that their player wasn't going to be playing, and I went home and everyone was in bed. And those are the times. That's the other side of football that is tough. It's tough. I don't care what anyone says, that's tough. And I missed a lot of things over my years. I mean, it sounds like I regret it. I don't regret 1 minute of football, if I'm honest with you. But there's times you then reflect back and you think, one of my school friends, unfortunately, developed kidney problems, and he died at the age of 30. And I didn't go to his funeral because it was a Friday, I think, and we had a game the next day. And it was in the afternoon and we were away, and I was like, and I couldn't go. I missed my mum's graduation. And you start to, do you know what I mean? I missed quite a few of my friends' weddings because it's the ongoing joke, isn't it? Or it used to be anyway in football, this idea of everyone gets married in June. The wedding, I think I got married the same weekend as if I remember right, people like Steven Gerrard and all that lot, because it was the weekend that every footballer or everybody that works in football gets married, you know. And so those 2 weeks in June, and yeah, as I said, but that was life. That was it. You know, you did 7 days. And if somebody said you're in, whilst in the early days, it didn't annoy me. I think, if I'm honest, towards the end, it kind of grated a bit and thought, hang on a minute, my life's more important than this. And my wife's in HR. She could never believe football. She said, but you got holiday. I'm like, yeah, I know, but you know, but you got a day off a week. Yeah, no, I can't, you know. And I just used to use that phrase, that's football. And she hated it. She absolutely hated that phrase. That's football. You just do it. And you do it because you love it. You do it because you love it. And everybody there is the same. Every single person, the camaraderie that you get in football is unbelievable. And do you know what? It's weird. And I'm very honest about my, what I do in my past. When I was at university, I worked at McDonald's. Right. So I worked at McDonald's and I got up to floor manager and all that kind of stuff. And they wanted me at the time to give up physio at university and go and do that, which I didn't. But the reason I'm saying it is the camaraderie at McDonald's in those 90s was the same. They had it. They had you. You used to run around like headless chickens, you know, trying to literally earn as much money as you possibly could for McDonald's and serve as many people in an hour as you possibly could for McDonald's. And football was like that. You did everything you could to get players out there, whatever it took. And if it meant I had to give up something, if it meant I had to say, no, I can't go and do this, if it meant that I couldn't go out with my family, you did, which some people will say is sad. But people that have been in football know, I think that is just the way it is. And it has changed. Definitely in the last couple of years I was in it, you started to see it becoming a bit more what I would call normalized, where you do get more in terms of holidays in the season and all that kind of stuff. It's and quite rightly. As I said, it's not. I don't mind the fact that I didn't. It was just the norm. Everybody did. You don't moan about it, because my belief is if you moan about it, then don't be in it. You know what the alternative is. Come out and go and work somewhere else. Go and work in a clinic if you want to. Go and work, teach like the alternatives. Don't moan about the fact you've got to be in. But yeah, is it easy? No.
Yeah, and how have you found it since then? Was it what you wanted it to be, or like what's
aspects of it? Yes, aspects of, without a doubt. I have my family life, and I love my family life, and I have my weekends. And I was talking to a friend of mine, Chris Hedges, who used to be the the academy physio at Norwich, and he was saying the other day the same thing, that I've got my weekends, which is lovely, and I don't think about that anymore, if I'm honest with you. Saturday I get up and do whatever I've got to do with the kids, and Sunday and all that, and off I go. And yeah, it's weird. So that element of it I love being able to just take holiday when I want to go, and having my summer holidays and all that kind of stuff is fantastic. You do miss, of course you miss the cut and thrust of it all, and I don't think anybody who's been in it long enough is being honest, if they said that they don't miss it. And I do miss it, and I do miss that day-to-day camaraderie that you built with everybody else around you, and that team spirit, and the idea of doing everything. And the day where you'd go in and you'd have you walk in, there's breakfast for you, then go and have your your meetings, then you go and do your assessments, then you do. But every day, although that sounds very samey every day, you didn't know what was going to walk in your door. Someone would literally walk in and they'd woken up overnight with pain in their ankle and loved it. And although it was really high pressured, and I'm kind of a person that I find pressure hard, when people put pressure on you and you want to do things, and there's loads of pressure putting people back out there and treating injuries and assessing injuries and all that. But you enjoyed it as well. You got a buzz out of it. You got a buzz out of that. And then the buzz on match day of walking out and just, the crowd and just being part of that, and being in the halftime team talk, and the pre-match team talk, and the after the game, and the fact that if you won, it was, your weekend was made. If you lost, it was rubbish, sometimes I would cancel the meal with my wife and go, that's it, we're not going out tonight, I've had enough, you know. And yeah, it's life. So do I miss that? Of course I do. And I think, as I said, I think everybody would say that, because you're institutionalized. That's how I would say you are institutionalized, but you don't lose aspects of what you did, you know. And I have that work ethic now, if I'm honest, you know, and I still do quite a lot of, I'm really lucky. I've got a really varied job. As I say, I do my lecturing and I do my task work so we have, as I said, talented athletes. We also have Reading Academy Football Club that we do work with, and Leander Rowing Club. I also do the under-19 Wales men's team. So I have that fix, if I'm honest with you, of doing football for a week. It's different. I'm the other side now as the international physio, where I literally, you know, people come on camp and, you know, they're injured, off you go back to your club kind of thing. And I know that feeling of being the club physio when it was international weekend and thinking, just literally sitting there like that and with your fingers crossed all weekend that you didn't get a phone call. And then, so I now have to make that phone call saying, I'm really sorry, you know, your player's been injured, but I get that fix, and that's lovely. And I work with some great people at Wales in terms of coaches, you know, and staff there, and I love that. I really enjoy that aspect of it, and it's good for me clinically. I didn't want to just teach. I love teaching. I love giving back. It sounds corny, but it's true. I love giving back to people and giving them experiences of what I've had over my career, and but I still want it to be current. I want to be up to date. I want to be modern, you know, and I want to, if I want to give an example, I don't want to say, well, when I was 2012 I was treating someone. I want to say last week I was doing this, or you know, the other weekend I was doing it. So that's really good for me as a physio. It's really important you maintain your clinical skills. I really do believe that, you know, and so I'm lucky I can still do that. I still teach on the emergency aid courses. So I teach for the Football Association on their ITMIF courses, the level 4 courses. And I also teach on the Football Association of Wales equivalent course, which is good for me pitch side, because it means it keeps my skills up to date, and I can still, you know, I'm keeping up to date with all what's going on with regards to, you know, the trauma medicine. And only this year, or only this month, I've just started a course at the university on non-medical prescribing. So becoming a non-medical prescriber. So all these things, if I'm honest, I wouldn't have had a chance to do half of that if I was in football. You know, I managed to do my master's in football, but it took me, you know, ages to do it because I just didn't have the time to do it. And now I do have time. So yeah, I use that kind of scales. You know, you got the things, excuse me, that were great and I really miss. And there's things now that I probably even now take for granted and think, you know, that I do now that I never had when I was in football. I mean, one of the things is annual leave. I remember sitting in my interview when I first came to Bucks, and my head of school at the time said, okay, so you get, you know, X number of days annual leave. Oh, fantastic. And she said, you know, is that okay? I said, yeah. What do I do? What's annual leave then? She said, well, you know, and I sound a bit naive and stupid, but I was like, can I take it when I want? She's like, well, yeah, of course you can. You just book it. And I said, what, even during the academic year? Now, admittedly, I don't tend to take it during the academic year. I don't think it's, but you can if you find cover, the odd bit, because at the end of the day, I'm a big believer in well-being and keeping your staff happy and all that kind of stuff. And I think just having that flexibility, it was really weird in that interview. I was just thinking, guys, yeah, wow, okay, yeah, lovely. I can book a day's leave, and you know, I didn't do it that way when we were at Norwich. In Norwich, it was very different, you know, and when I was in football, it was, you just got told when you were taking your leave. And that was part of it. And I don't think that's wrong necessarily. That's part, you expect that, I think, when you work in it. So yeah, there's elements. I look back very fondly on it, which is good, because that's how I wanted to look back on football. And as you said, but I'm still lucky that I do get the odd little bits that I'm still allowed, you know, that still keep me clinically up to date and modern. And I think it's good for the students, because I think they can see that you do still treat people. Do you mean you still treat people? You still know what you're doing, you know, and you can still pass on the up-to-date information as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You've mentioned quite a few things there, but in terms of a memorable moment, do you have one particular one in mind that really stands out that you were kind of thinking, wow, this is just unbelievable?
Oh, I've got loads. I have to say, I think the playoff final win is probably a lot of people say finals and all that kind of stuff was great as an experience, as just an experience. Even losing, going through the one at Cardiff, driving through the streets of Cardiff, sitting on the front of the bus, and thousands and thousands of Norwich fans lining the streets, and I used to think, wow, those people, what would they give to sit where I am now? What would they want to do? So I definitely enjoyed that. I was fortunate enough to, and probably not Colin's fortune, but I was fortunate enough that one week he was ill when I was at Arsenal to go away for the Champions League. So Olympiacos, completely different world, being part of that kind of club and traveling, away. So the Champions League, I was, as I said, really, really lucky. That, yeah, I was really lucky to be able to do that. So those would be my highlights in terms of experiences. But and I know it sounds corny, but to be honest with you, and without using people's names, seeing some people return to injury, having been out for such a long time, is massively rewarding. You're nervous. I'm even more nervous sitting on the sideline thinking, oh, please don't get it. Please don't get re-injured. Please don't, But that feeling that when they've been out for such a long period of time and they get back and play at the level that they were playing at before, I've got loads of those memories where I just thought, yeah, you go home happy, even though you might have lost, you go home happy, and especially like they score or do something, and it just makes it, and that's what you do it for. You at the end of the day, our jobs as club physios were, it still is to get as many people out on that pitch in the best shape you possibly can and keep them out there. And that feeling is you can't buy that. You can't buy that.
Mm. No, that's amazing. Look, I really appreciate you sharing all these stories. It's been great. And yeah, I've kind of followed your career and, we've met a couple of times throughout the process, but I really appreciate it. And it's good to hear it from the sports therapy angle as well. So look, Neal, I really appreciate your time. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you soon.
No, thank you. It's been lovely, and it's good to look back on these things. I look back, as you can probably tell, quite fondly with all these memories, and it's good to go over some of the good old times. But and as I said at the start, I hope going forwards, the way that sports therapy, sports rehab is beginning to put itself onto the map. That's the way forward. It's the new, dare I say it, the new generation to take over. But no, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time, and hope you've enjoyed it. And there's plenty of stories, there always is, unfortunately, and everyone's always says, oh, you ought to write a book. Baz, didn't he, wrote his books on on the smell of football, and I love those. I've read those, and I absolutely love them. I can just relate to everything that he says, and I think there are so many stories and a lot of them need to stay. They need to stay in football, because they're priceless. But no, it's been brilliant. Really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Top man. Cheers,
Okay.
Neal. See
No
you
problem.
soon. Thank you.
Cheers.